I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been watching Shark Tank for many years as an entrepreneur. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. Let me ask you a question. What does being relentless mean to you?
I mean, the whole idea about setting a goal like that and prioritizing it is to be able to actually execute on it. There's millions of great ideas, but there's very few executional skills in the world. And I've learned this as an investor for decades. The right combination is someone who can actually execute, that has a plan. That's very powerful. And so you got to stick to it. You got to form a plan and stick to it and execute on it. And that's not easy, but if you can do both, you're very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed it. It's like they say a goal without a plan is just a dream. You know what I mean? Now you have had incredible success. I don't think anybody everybody knows the amount of success that you've had, but what I'm always interested in, I always know that, people always get obsessed with comparing their before to people's afters, right? So I love hearing the origin story. I love hearing, where did you start? What were the struggles that you had when you got started in business? Like, can you take us kind of through your journey in terms of how you got started? What were some of the problems that you had that made you be relentless so you could take the next step and ultimately led you to the journey where you are right now?
I think you have to have a defining moment that motivates you. And for me, being an entrepreneur, and many of the people that are listening now are basically entrepreneurs. When you're running your own practice, you're an entrepreneur. You're taking chances, you're putting your own destiny in your own hands, and you're deciding that you have the ability to get a good outcome one day. That's the reason you would do it. And it is not a 9-to-5 opportunity. And it's definitely not a destination. It's a forever journey. I mean, it never ends. And so it's not for everybody, but the people that can do it, eventually, if they're successful, achieve freedom. It's not the pursuit of money, it's the pursuit of personal freedom that matters. And I've been very fortunate in my life to, do that multiple times, and also had some catastrophic failures along the way and learn from them. But my thought process on this is, if you decide to take this journey, be testing your assumptions all the time, because whatever I assumed I was going to do, and a lot of the business plans I had, lots of different, boulders, mountains, valleys, whatever you want to call them, got in my way. And it's what you do about it that matters, because it's the relentless pursuit of the goal, no matter how many times you have to pivot. And you're going to have to pivot. And, I talk a lot about this these days, because we've gone through this extraordinary period in America where for 30 months now, we've gone through an incredible change in the economy. And I had almost 50 investments prior to the pandemic. Now 34 of them have survived, and they're stronger than ever. And I've always enjoyed understanding, what did they do to change their business model so that they ended up successful when others didn't? What's the difference between success and failure? And we spent a lot of time looking at that.
So maybe you could tell us, what is the difference between success and failure? I'm sure everybody's dying to know.
Well, let's walk through what happened in the first 20 months of the pandemic. I don't care what sector you were in, it affected you. There's no question about it. And so we learned that, people had to work remotely. That was something no one even thought they would do. Shutting down an office, sending everybody home, not understanding how that was going to work, was an uncertainty for even giant businesses and small ones alike. And then we all adapted this technology that we're talking to each other now on, that's become everyday life. But what really changed was the channels of distribution and customer acquisition. So if you're a company that relied solely on retail distribution or on somebody else's distribution strategy, you were out of luck, because those distribution channels shut down for almost 5 months, and many companies went out of business. But if you figured out a way to reach out to your customer and acquire them online using social media, using media platforms, using cable television, whatever it was that you did, and you were able to acquire customers successfully, you survived. But not only did you survive, you ended up with a business that was better than the one you had before, because you figured out your customer acquisition costs, you figured out which strategies worked, you figured out what your message should be, and what channels to spend money on and which ones not to. And this has been the same for every practice. I don't care whether you're a lawyer, you're a dentist, or you're a dog groomer, or you're a trainer. They all did the same things. There were those that were very successful in messaging and understanding the systems around what you had to do to acquire that customer, and those that weren't. And that's the difference. And the law business is no different either. You have to acquire customers, and customers have to trust you and see a vision of you if they've never heard of you before. And it gives them some confidence that engaging with you, investing their time is going to have a good outcome. That's the challenge we all have today. Every business has. And clearly within your practice, and that's what you guys do, is help people understand how to acquire customers. I know you call it lead generation. I call it customer acquisition. And it's the same challenge for every business in America today.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that really I saw firsthand with so many different law firms, once going into the pandemic, and then, you know, as they kind of emerged out of the pandemic, the ones that were successful versus the ones that weren't, there's this difference in having resources compared to being resourceful, having having some resourcefulness, right? What in your experience, do you find that the most successful entrepreneurs, are they the ones that are the most resourceful, where they're basically able to assess the situation and just figure it out? Is that something that you've seen over your years?
Most successful have a system and a protocol that they stick to. They figure out what are the metrics of success that I have to do. And I boil this back down to customer acquisition. You have to acquire a customer, then you have to service the customer, and that customer has to go through the experience with a good outcome so that they tell other customers the same thing. Word of mouth is extremely powerful in every consumer business, whether you're a practitioner or whether you're selling cupcakes or whether you're selling greeting cards or wireless charging. I mean, I have all these businesses, but if you look at the successful entrepreneurs, they try and figure out, how do I leverage, and I think you've talked about this, my time, because that's my most important and valuable asset. What am I doing with my time? And have I automated customer acquisition? And I've achieved understanding the cost of that customer acquisition. And once I figured out what works, can I pour gasoline on that fire and acquire more customers? But it's how you optimize your time and what systems you put in place that determine success versus failure. And the companies that scale, I mean, I've always said this, it's really hard to make the first $1 million in sales, next to impossible to get the next 4 million. So you're a $5 million business. But once you're at 5 million, then you figured out the systems, and you can get to 50 million very easily, because now you just have to pour gasoline on what's already working.
Absolutely. You know, you said that you had 50 some odd investments, and I think you're down to 34 right now. I'm sure you have other companies as well. There's no possible way, and I'm sure I know that what a lot of lawyers are thinking. They're thinking, my God, I run one business and I'm overwhelmed, I'm overworked, and here you are, 34 plus. Like, what are some of the principles that you have been forced to implement in your life so that you can actually get this done? Because you can't, it's impossible for you to do it all. So what advice would you have for people in that situation?
Well, I have a really good team of people around me, but we assess this portfolio of companies in very simple ways, in a system that we find is impeccable in terms of giving us the information we need. We look at the tear sheets each Tuesday, which simply have 2 numbers on them: revenue and free cash flow. You can learn a lot from that. And we monitor them weekly. And so, you know, for example, people are telling me we're in a recession. I don't see it yet. We may get to one, but I see weekly sales numbers in almost every geography in America. I don't see a slowdown yet. I'm sure we'll have one, but not now. So that's one thing. Number 2 is it's cash flow, because in a private business, you care about how much cash you generate. Return of capital is more important than return on capital. And so we look at those 2 things each week, and our team looks at it. And when we see a problem emerging, because either revenue is slowing or cash flow is slowing or shrinking, that means costs are going up, we contact the company, because we've seen this movie before, and we try and figure out what we can do to help. And the other thing that, you know, I'm good at for my companies is I've got millions and millions of social media followers, and I like to help them acquire customers using that platform. I can't say enough about how important it is to understand how to use social media to acquire customers.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. You touched on the actual tactic, but one of the things I'm curious about is your actual time. What are some of your rules of thumb when it comes to your time and protecting your time?
So this is a trick I learned from one of my women CEOs years ago. She doesn't even need technology to do this. She takes a yellow sticky note and puts 3 things on it at night that she's going to achieve before she gets onto social media, before she reads emails, before she does anything the next day. before she gets distracted. And so they could be anything. They could be something you have to do for your family. They could be something you have to do for your business, but there are three things you have to do.
Mhm.
And you don't do anything else till you've achieved those three things. The productivity that you get from doing that is incredible because so few people are able to focus on what really matters. And these are critical things you have to do, whatever they are, they have to get done. And so if you make those a priority, you get them done, the rest of your day is easy because you've achieved what you needed to do in terms of productivity. I do that every day now. The three things. It's always three things. And I don't mess around with it. I make sure I get it done before I do anything else. Try it sometime. It really works.
Absolutely. So, you get these three things done, you got everything going. Now, let me ask you this. In terms of another thing that we've talked about a lot is just the mindset. The mindset of, can I hire? Can I delegate? Can I actually grow my business to the next level? And I think this is something that you really focus on as well. But how important do you find mindset is, especially when you're dealing with 34 different entrepreneurs, 34 different personality types? How important is mindset, being right up here at all times to continue having success? And is that something you even look at when you're actually choosing to invest with somebody?
It's very important. In fact, it's everything because you can't be productive if you can't focus. Mindset is about focus. It's about determining what matters, what the priorities are, prioritizing them. And in the case of a business where your time is your most valuable asset, you have to delegate. And the biggest challenge people have in delegation is, and this is why you have to hire properly, if you find someone that does something well, and I always try a contract first. I work with people for 6 months on a contract basis before they come full-time in our operating business so that everybody can start to work with them and see the pros and cons and the merits they have and what challenges they have, because you figure that out within 6 months. And we pay them well for that period, but it's giving us a chance to assess them and they're checking us out too. But when we find someone that's really good and they're going to take over a mandate to do whatever it is going to be, we let them do it. We don't get in their way. I don't stop them. I say, look, here's the goal over the next 90 days. You don't have to call in if you don't want to. I just need you to achieve these goals. You don't have to come into the office. Doesn't matter. But every Tuesday when we have the team meeting, you got to give us an update on where you're at on achieving the goal. And so that allows you to delegate and gives you tremendous productivity because you're spending your time on other things that matter more. And that's why hiring people to get leverage is really important. So whether it's marketing, customer acquisition, customer support, or service, or whatever it is, more lawyers so they can do more cases, I get it. But you have to be able to delegate. And that's the weakest thing I find in the link. People can't seem to do it. Bad managers get in the way of operational people. And the outcomes are terrible when you do that. You've got to stay focused on delegating and letting them achieve their goals.
Now, delegating is something that we talked about, a lot today, and you're hammering on the same thing, that it's absolutely essential. Now, one of the challenges that I think a lot of lawyers that are on here have struggled with is that they've tried to hire a team, but they haven't attracted those A players, or they haven't been able to identify those A players. And that's something that we actually help people with when they're in our coaching programs. We teach them how we hire A players because our team consists of all A players. But let me ask you, you said you have a fantastic team. What are some of the things that you do that allow you to attract those A players so that this is the type of person I want to bring onto my team because I can delegate to them with confidence?
I don't get in their way. I let them do their own thing. I introduce them to everybody I know. I don't hide them. So once we bring a new team member in, we introduce them to all of the vendors we work with, all the companies we've invested in, everybody that we work with, so they feel that they're part of the team, which is very important. You want to socialize that. And then I let them do their thing. And that's the key. Now, they don't always work out, but if you set goals and people consistently achieve them 9 out of 10 times, that's a keeper. You want to keep that person because they're getting institutional knowledge about your organization, which is extremely valuable. And you can't pay somebody for that. That's just the time they've committed with you. So you hire well and then treat them well, pay them properly, pay them market. And then all of a sudden you'll get the leverage of having someone to do something incrementally. You don't have to, and you can invest your time in growing the business a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to lawyers all the time. One of the biggest fears is all around hiring, right? Because a lot of attorneys that are on here, they've got, they're a solo, or they've got, one employee, maybe two employees, but they're afraid to hire that next person because now they're responsible for making sure that they can support that person. That person has enough weight or has enough work, that they have enough cases that they can pay their salary, right? And one of the things I've always talked about is that courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is moving ahead even though you're scared to death. So can you talk a little bit about some of the times that you've been afraid, that you've been not sure what the next step is, and how you've moved forward through that and what the results have been?
I prefer to invest in entrepreneurs that have actually felt the sting of failure a couple of times. I like it when someone comes to me and says, look, I failed twice on this idea. I now know what I did wrong, and I'm going to do it right this time, and I want you to invest in me. That's a great story because I know the sting of failure is extremely motivating for an entrepreneur, and that particularly when they've gained the knowledge of the mistake they made. And everybody makes mistakes. There's no question about it. No one's perfect. But taking somebody out and investing in that they've never run a business or never achieved anything without, going through the process of building it up is very difficult because they will fail. There's no question. Everybody, that has been successful has learned from a whole series of mistakes. So you can't fear that. You can't fear bad outcomes. You have to deal with it. I mean, there is a solution. If you can't deal with it, just go work for somebody. Be an employee. I prefer not to do that, but then that risk is on someone else's shoulders and they're dealing with it instead of you, but they're also being more successful because they're owners. And I think you have to do that trade-off, but success is not free. It takes a tremendous amount of work, but if you understand that, it's not so daunting. I mean, that's why they call it work. It's not free. You've got to execute yourself. And I think everybody, that's looking to work with you and try these systems and everything else gets that joke. They're trying to make themselves better. They're trying to invest in themselves. I totally get that. I think that's a very good outcome.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. I talked to an investor one time and they said they refuse to invest with anybody that hasn't cycled before. And I'm like, what does cycled mean? And they're like, I refuse to invest with somebody who has not had a business that's been successful and then they've lost it, because they appreciate that pain, that pain drives them forward. You know what I mean? So, and I always look at it like, I don't ever feel like I failed at anything. I've had things where I have had different outcomes than I expected. But I believe that when I learn from something, everything is here. Life is happening to you or for you. I happen to believe that life is happening for me. So I don't think I've ever actually failed at anything. I've just gotten different outcomes that I expected. So what are some times that you have maybe gotten a different outcome, maybe not failed, but gotten a different outcome than you expected? And how did that propel you forward?
Well, years ago, I would make investments, even though I had this gut feeling they weren't good ideas. And I would just say, well, how do I know I'm going to be successful or not? Why don't I just take a chance? And I've changed that now. I don't do that anymore because I've really grown to trust my intuition, because intuition is the definition of experience. The more mistakes you make, the better you are at avoiding them. And that's the whole idea. And I feel now I've made enough mistakes to know what works and what doesn't. And so I rarely make an investment anymore that I don't feel 100% convinced is going to work. And my batting average has gone up dramatically because I really stay focused on these opportunities that I think are going to work, and they deliver for me. That's the key. But that's using experience. And I think everybody should consider that. The more time you do that you spend on something that is your livelihood, if it's your business, the better you're going to get at it. There's no question about it. It's hard to get worse unless you're not committed to it. But time, energy at the beginning is where it's so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because a lot of times people refuse to do something long enough and be bad at it long enough to actually be good at it, So that's a fantastic point. Now I got one more question for you, and then I'm going to pass it over to my partner, Bill, here. That question is, I know in my life, my mentors have taken me so much further, so much faster than I could have ever gotten there on my own. Can you tell me the value that you've gotten from your mentors? And what would you say to anybody who's kind of like, do I need a mentor? Do I need to hire somebody that teach me things? Like, what would you say to that?
I think mentorship's crucial. I mean, you should find somebody that you trust to give you a sounding board, because most important thing about mentorship is to have someone else examine your proposal, not you. Most people don't do that. They think, all right, I'm going to get it right. I've been successful before. I'm just going to do what I want to do. But it's so important to actually listen to somebody else. And here's something else I learned from yet another mentor, another woman, one of my companies. She did a fantastic job. She said to me years ago, you know, Kevin, you talk too much. You should shut up and listen. And I said, well, yeah, I get that. But she said, no, no, no. Most people spend 3/4 of their day talking and 1/3 listening. Reverse it. Try reversing it and see what happens. And I did. And this is years ago. When you shut up and listen, you learn a lot more information that you didn't know about the world around you. And it's really important to try that, because you'll find you're much more powerful in terms of making, executing, and doing decisions that actually help you, because you've learned something by listening. You didn't, when you step on somebody, you don't let them finish and you talk instead, it's the same gibberish coming out of your mouth. You've said it 50 times already somewhere else, but there's nothing new about it. And that's why listening gives you new knowledge.
Yeah, that's absolutely 100% correct. Well, listen, I'm going to bring my partner Bill up here. He's going to hit you with a couple questions. It was great talking to you. Bill, come on up here.
Yeah.
And I'll let you take it over here. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Absolutely. Great question. So, Kevin, I'm super excited for this. I want to talk about money. Can we talk about money, Kevin?
Yeah, it's a topic I really love.
Okay, so I'm excited about this because we spent the this is probably going to be similar to your interviews with Grant Cardone. He's been on our events multiple times. So, we have some similar beliefs here around this. But I want to ask you, like, why are so many people afraid to set goals around money? And why aren't people public about the decision to, I'll just say it. I know everyone. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm going to say, to get rich. Why don't people say this? Why are we so secretive and like quiet about our need to be financially successful?
Well, it's a great question, but if you're pursuing entrepreneurship to get rich, you will fail. There's no question about it. What makes it work for an entrepreneur and why you're successful long-term is there's so much passion around people that enjoy what they do. So if you're in a business that you absolutely loathe, you will never get rich. But if you're passionate about it and you enjoy going to work, you tend to do more economic things in terms of making the business better. You're constantly striving for achieving higher goals because you enjoy it. You actually like doing it. That's where you got to get to. The whole idea of getting wealthy by just doing something boring and mundane, it never happens. You don't have to worry about that. Most entrepreneurs I talked to had great success. I say, do you remember the moment of becoming wealthy? And I remember our exit event, we sold our company for $4.2 billion. We never thought about it for a day. We all came back the next day and went to work. Yes, we had liquidity, but it didn't change our work ethic. We still wanted to achieve success from the work side, and we remained working. And I think it's sort of defining who you are around what you do is very important for people. And business and money comes secondarily to that. Great entrepreneurs achieve inner peace in the sense that they found a business they can run that they spend their entire focus on. And the outcomes are freedom, personal freedom. That's what happens. You end up successful financially to do the things you want to do. That's personal freedom.
So on that regard, let's talk about the seeking of external investments. And what I mean by that is people see stuff about NFTs and cryptocurrency and real estate and all these external things, but they're dealing with, let's say, I don't know, $100,000 in their bank or something, right? And they're getting all excited about these external opportunities when their greatest opportunity is sitting right in front of them, their own business. Everyone here is a business owner in some regard, right? And I see so many people get excited about the external and they're not doubling down on the internal. And you achieved your first chapter of wealth by, like you said, having a complete obsessive passion around what you were doing, building something spectacular, selling it for billions of dollars. And yet so many people look externally. So, there's this interesting process I want to hear your thoughts on about first chapter in business growth is investing in yourself and your skills. The second chapter, as you're investing in yourself, is invest as much as you can in your business, then get your business to a certain level where then you can make external investments and have cash flow, right? Passive income. So talk to us about that journey of going from the focus that it's required to double down on your own business before you look externally for opportunities.
I get asked all the time, what's my best investment been in my lifetime? And everybody's thinking I'm going to mention a stock or something. the best investment I ever made was in myself, and to leverage, what skills I had and try and use my capital to acquire skills that I didn't have. I mean, great partnerships in business are two partners, one has a skill set, the other doesn't, so they augment each other. And that's certainly what happened to me. I was able to find people that filled in the holes that I had. But investing in yourself ends up being the most powerful leverage you can have. And so if you can figure out a way to make yourself better at running your business will pay for all that eventually. And the systems you put in place and the scale you achieve and the customer acquisition costs that all that stuff becomes very valuable for an acquirer one day. So proving it out really matters. But the reason you can do that, normally you wouldn't, because you wouldn't love to do it, because it's not all about the business all the time. The reason you can get away with it is that you figured out that balance. You understand how this works and that you're trying to achieve that goal of personal freedom, and it all wraps itself together. Today, and I tell this to many people, what you want to achieve in your life is to get to a place where you don't have to answer the phone when it rings, because you just don't. You don't have to. And if you can get to that place, then you can actually do the things you want to do with your time. I block my day into 30-minute schedules each day. Start pretty early and go right through till after dinner. But the whole idea is if there's something on that list I don't want to do, I simply don't do it because I don't have to. And that is the personal freedom I talked about. And that's what I'd like to see everybody here get as well. It's really worth it. And it just gives you a whole new sense of what life can be and how interesting it can be when you don't have to do things that are shoved in front of your face. You choose what you want to do.